So I'm the founder of anacquiredchef, which you can see, I think, the logo somewhere on the screen. And it was an initiative I started through COVID just to develop an understanding of both the art and the alchemy of culinary. So in the spirit of wanting to loving to cook and cooking with love, that was sort of the inception of an acquired chef. So we have a list of ingredients in front of me. Just gonna have a blender jug that you're going to need. So I've just got mine over here to blend that spice paste together. We're going to start with some of the softer things that are going in. So we've got the cashew nuts. Now there's still water in there. I'm just going to drain that out. We don't want the water to go in. That would have been soaking for 30 minutes in boiling water. And that's just really to soften the cashew nuts so that they blend easily. So that's just going to go into the blender. Next up, we've got almonds. And so if you had almonds with skins on them, once you soak them in water, as you just saw, it comes off really easily. Again, discarding the water that it was soaking in, and then into the blender jug it goes. There we go. The next thing that we're going to be doing is desiccated coconut. So again, this is an unsweetened desiccated coconut. It's funny, in the northern parts of India, it's very different to the southern parts, and in southern parts, there's always a lot of coconut milk and coconut cream. But in India, in the northern parts, it's actually only ever desiccated coconut or coconut slices. So that's what's going in here today. So it's just shredded or desiccated coconut, whichever one you have, and that goes into the blender jug as well. Next up, we've got some ginger and garlic, equal parts. What I've done here is I've just bashed the ginger rather than trying to slice it up, because that just loosens up the fibers so that the blender blade doesn't have too much of a hard time. And along with that, some garlic as well. And so that's all going in. And the last thing that's going to go in is going to be the poppy seeds. So it's white poppy seeds, not black poppy seeds. It's called khaskhas in India. And the substitute for those who don't have that or couldn't get a hold of it is white sesame seeds. So it's just going to be a tablespoon of that goes in. They're basically a very sweet spice, a little bit nutty. And it's funny, it's actually got a little bit of, it helps with insomnia, to put it lightly. So it actually reduces your cortisol. It makes you feel really relaxed. So if you've had a tough week and you've got some of this going into your korma, you're going to feel really good at the end of the night. So that's going to be a tablespoon's worth of that to go in. And the only other thing that needs to go in is the yogurt, but I'm not going to put that in yet. I'm just going to give this guy a blend, just to kind of get everything loosened up first, and then we'll stop the blender, pop the yogurt back in, and then blend it again, and that should be the final touch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I might do everyone a favor and just go on mute while I blend. What I'm going to do is probably blend it for about a minute, just to really allow it to break apart, and then I'll come back off mute and do the yogurt. So I'm just going to do that right now, and I will substitute just cashew nuts only, if that's what you've got at home. It just makes it an extra creamy korma, because cashew nuts are really sort of sweet and light. So you're fine to do that. The ingredients that went into the blender, once again, were the, desiccated coconut, the garlic, the ginger, the cashew nuts, the almond, and the white poppy seed or white sesame seed, and also yogurt, which I'm about to put in now. Hopefully that answers your question, Pete. Just checking to see, yes, I am from Borneo, Michelle. I'm from Sabah, northern Borneo. What's the ingredients that helps with insomnia? It's the poppy seed, the white poppy seed specifically. It reduces, I don't know what the chemical compound is, but it helps reduce cortisol, which basically makes you relax. So that's white poppy seed. The step-by-step recipe will be sent out after class. You should have the ingredients list for now, Alyssa. So hopefully that answers that question. How much yogurt? So this is about, so in the recipe, I think I had said to put three-quarters of a cup of yogurt all up. So depending on how much you had put in with the chicken or the lamb, the rest of it will go in here. Could you use frozen coconut instead of, yeah, sure, why not? I think that should be fine, as long as it's not sweetened, and you'll probably need to soften it before you blend it, because, and by that, defrost it, I meant, rather than soften it. So just allow it to thaw a little bit before you throw it in the blender. And let's see. Yes, the white poppy seeds, it helps with you just sort of relaxing, which tends to help you fall asleep or induces sleep. So here we go with, hopefully that answers all the questions. I'm just going in with the yogurt now. So that's I've got just a quarter of a cup of yogurt sitting with the chicken, which I'll just show you in a second. So I'm putting half a cup in here. Doesn't matter either way. As long as you've got enough to get the blender blade going, you should be fine. That's the real intent. And it also makes it nice and creamy. I'm just going to go into the blender spoon to just kind of, you should be able to see how it's all sticking on the walls. And I just want to make sure that I have an opportunity to scrape it down so it goes into the yogurt that I've just popped in before I put it back on for another whiz, on mute, of course. And then I'm going to add it to this bowl and set it aside so we can get ready to start cooking. So I'm just going to go on mute again and maybe take a look at some more questions. I'll be right back. My blender blade is struggling just a smidge, so I'm going to pop in just a tablespoon extra of yogurt to keep it going. And while I'm off mute, I might just quickly take a look at some of the questions. I'm going to go on mute one more time and finish off that blend, and then we can get started with cooking. Instead of the coconut milk, Michael, you'd be adding the coconut yogurt to the blender. The milk comes later on. Hopefully that answers that question. I'm just going to pour this guy out now, and then we can get started with the rest of the ingredients. I like taking it out now as opposed to directly into the pan because sometimes it's difficult to get into all the nooks and crannies. You do want to pull out everything that's in there. I wouldn't be obsessive about blending it to an absolute pureed paste if your blender is not strong enough. I mean, you want it to as much as possible, but if it doesn't, you're just going to get a less smooth gravy, and it's still delicious, but it's just going to have a slightly different texture, which is totally fine if that's what your blender can do. All good if there are no questions. What I'll do next is I'll just talk through the differences around the ingredients. So if you are doing the vegan version, you'll notice that there's a lot more, like there's only a little bit of cream and yogurt that's being used for the traditional version. Whereas for the vegan version, there's almond or coconut milk, there's coconut cream, and then there's coconut yogurt as well. And the reason for that is because dairy is a lot creamier and sweeter than just coconut fat. And so that's why there's an abundance of sort of those different variants of coconut or cashew nut or almond milk or plant-based milks, just to make sure that we're getting the same effect as we would if we were making it with dairy. So we'll talk through that in a second. I've got the paste ready to go, so I'm just going to set that to the side. I'm going to grab the rest of the ingredients. If you're doing the vegetarian version, you should have the vegetables roasted and ready to go, or at least be at the point where you're starting to pull it out of the oven. So here are the next batch of ingredients, lots of fun. So I'm just going to go through them first, and then we can get started with the cooking. And if anyone has questions, now's probably a good time to just make sure everything's in order, so that we can get cooking. So, so here I have, again, I'm doing the meat version. So this is just chicken, and I've marinated that in the rest of the yogurt. So again, 3/4 were in total. So this had a quarter in it along with Kashmiri chili, which looks really fiery red, but actually isn't that spicy, and some salt. And that's been sitting in there actually overnight because I didn't want to wake up early and do it for 30 minutes. So you can do it anywhere between 30 minutes to 4 hours if you like, and that should be fine. I've got shallots over here. So these are red shallots, not banana or French shallots. You can certainly use those. And just so that you know what they look like, they're just like a regular red shallot that kind of has little, sort of itty bitty bits that you kind of pull apart like a shallot, except that it's red. Again, it gives the flavor of onion without being oniony, and that's why we use shallots instead of onions, because it's a very sort of a mild dish. So that's that guy. Some of the other things we're going through that I mentioned I'd show. So this little guy here, this golden water, is actually saffron water. It's saffrons that were crushed in this guy over here and popped in with almost boiling hot water to get that color out. And you crush it to kind of increase the surface area of the saffron threads so that you can pull out more color. And that's the main reason you crush it up like that. As I mentioned before, this is Indian. Ooh, I've got some yogurt on my finger. I didn't realize that. This is Indian cinnamon. So it's cinnamon bark, not cinnamon quills. So this is the one that you would typically use if you can get your hands on it. If you can't, then of course you can use cinnamon quill. And this is the one where I've suggested adding more cinnamon to the dish instead of the Indian bay leaf. And that Indian bay leaf kind of looks like this. very different from a normal bay leaf. It's got the veins coming out from the bottom directly going up as opposed to a regular leaf. It is from the cinnamon tree or the cassia cinnamon tree, and it's really got a special kind of cinnamon flavor. Now, if you have the recipe card with you and you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see some of the write-ups that I've done around the differences in spices, just the way sort of they're used in India relative to some of the more commonly used spices. What else did we need to go through? Yes, we had some other spices that we were using. So we were going to do green cardamom and black cardamom. So we were going to do 2 green cardamoms. I'm just going to grab them now. So that's what they look like. I'm just going to pop them into the mortar and pestle because I'm going to crack them open. I've also got 1 black cardamom going in. And so for those that don't have black cardamom, I think I've suggested an extra 2 cardamoms, green cardamoms, and a little bit of smoked paprika, but we'll come back to that later. I think I need to also be adding caraway seeds. That's right. So that's this guy over here. That's about a teaspoon's worth that's going to go in. And I'm just going to check my recipe card to keep me honest. I think that's all of it. Yes, that is all of it. So I'll talk through just those of you who don't have Kashmiri chili powder. You'd be using cayenne pepper. I've suggested, I think, 3/4 of a teaspoon. So you just need to make sure that you start with just a quarter. Because korma is really delicate, all the measurements that are in there for the substitutes are the maximum. So start with just a pinch or a 1/4 of a teaspoon and then kind of just see how it tastes. Because if you put too much in, too much turmeric, too much cayenne pepper, too much smoked paprika, it will create a lot of bitterness. And if you don't like bitterness at all, you want to kind of go easy and don't be heavy-handed with those 3 spices, just a smidge of each. Just going to stop and just look at some of the questions coming through. All right, so substitutes for saffron. So that will be the turmeric, and you only use it very sparingly, again, because turmeric can be quite bitter, especially in this dish because it's really delicate. So you kind of don't want to put too much. You'll get a faint yellow, so not like a super golden yellow, but that should be enough to get that color going for you. You would use a cup of water with the saffron. So that's 250 mils. I'm not sure how much that is in ounces. I apologize. I'm not very good with conversion rates. And I only have 1 black cardamom is more than enough. So we'll just crack that open now and get it ready to go into the pan, Michael. So hopefully that answers that question. And if there were any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to get the pan going. Cool. So we're going to get the pan hot to start, and then we're going to drop the heat way down. And the reason for that is because korma is braised on a really low fire and on an open lid as well. So there's a lot of stirring and there's a lot of patience and there's a lot of low heat involved. Those are probably the 3 pillars of making this korma. And the reason for that is because of the amount of dairy and fat in it. If you kind of get the heat up too high, it's just going to burn stuff, and then it's going to turn bitter and not taste very good, and we don't want that. So we're going to get that heat going. I'm going to put in a good amount of oil. So we're going to go in with 3 tablespoons of oil, of any odorless oil. I'm specifically not using ghee or clarified butter because there's enough creaminess in this dish already. There is yogurt, there is poppy seed, there is all the nuts. If maybe you didn't have enough nuts, or you wanted to kind of dial that back a little bit so that you could have ghee, you could. Or alternatively, if you don't want to listen and go with ghee anyway, that's totally fine. But it's just going to bring on more richness to the dish, which is great. But it's just decadence because korma is a royal dish. It came about with the Mughal Empire because it was just a combination of meat-eating Persians that came into India and the abundance of all the things that we've just thrown into the dish to make it really sort of a regal, creamy, rich dish. And that's sort of the origin of it. So I'm just going to go in now with 3 tablespoons of oil. And once the oil is heated, I'm going to drop the fire down and start with the onions. There we go. Just going to get that nicely coated all around. Very cool. So I'm just going to drop that fire down to about, hopefully you can see that, but it was at that heat, and I'm now dropping it down to about that sort of a heat roughly. And it's just going to be a slow cook, so we get a chance to chat while that happens. So I'm going to get my onions ready to go in, and then I'm going to come back to the spices. And if you are using the Indian bay leaf, that's probably the only spice that doesn't go in now. It goes in later on with the paste and the chicken. So we want to add that in when we're actually braising the chicken rather than frying it at the start. So onions going in. And I'm just going to go in with my mortar and pestle and crack open the cardamoms. And I personally don't like the husk in any dish that I make. I just like pulling out the seeds. It doesn't make a material difference whether you keep it on or take it off, but I personally don't like accidentally biting into a cardamom husk, so I choose to take them off. So it's your choice really, but that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna get the seeds out and pop them in and get rid of these little husks. All right, we've got some questions coming in. Black cardamom, yep. How much water do I, yep, we covered that one. Can you use red onions if you don't have shallots, or shallots is essential? I would say shallots, or else you would need to use very little onions, very, very little onions, because again, this dish is very delicate. And if you put too much of an oniony flavor in, then it becomes overpowering. So I would say use, if you've got like red Spanish onions, anywhere between half to a quarter to just kind of give it a slight onion feel. You won't have as much of the sort of onion bite in it, but at least you won't have it sort of too oniony either. So hopefully that answers that, Danielle. Is that Danielle Fitton? Hopefully it is. It's good to see you again. And is candlenut used often in Indian cuisine, or are cashews more common? Yes, Indian cuisine does use candlenut a lot. I think it's called kamiri. And it's actually used in Malaysian cooking as well, but it is not used in this dish. Cashew nuts is more common for korma. Kamiri is probably more of a East Indian and South Indian, more than North Indian. Yes, it is used anyhow, but yeah, not in this dish, I'd say. Probably more in other dishes. I can't think of any off the top of my head though, Catherine. But it is used to answer your question. It's actually a really good ingredient. It's actually used in laksa, oddly enough, which I'm doing a class for on Monday. So I have some sitting on the side. All right, I'm gonna go in with my cardamom seeds. So that's gonna go in, and then I've got a teaspoon of caraway seeds, or shahi jeera is the Indian name for it, that's going in. So that's this guy over here. So it's not cumin, it's caraway. Just a teaspoon of that to go in. And then a nice little stir to bring that heat up before we put the chicken in. So we don't want this sort of cooking for all too long. You can already start to see the onions browning. So we'll let that brown a little bit more. And then we're going in with the chicken first. So chicken goes in for those that are doing the traditional option. And then if you're doing the vegetables, they go in as well. I would not put the cauliflower in. I would just put the potatoes and the carrots in, because the cauliflower should be cooked all the way through. We'd be adding that at the end along with the peas. So hopefully that, for those that are doing the vegetarian version, just be mindful of that. Will caraway seeds come in here too with the black cardamom? Yes. So another way for you to do it next time, if you don't like the caraway seeds sort of in here whole, is to blend it. I personally quite like it, and I like to bite into it. So I keep it in, and that's typically how it's done as well, but you're always more than welcome to blend it if you don't like it this time. The black cardamom goes in as well, yes, just the pods, the seeds from my perspective, because I don't like the pods too much. But yes, laksa on Monday, Susie, yes. I'm doing a curry laksa class on Monday, although we'll be also doing a different laksa class back on Tradition Kitchens in a month, but we'll talk more about that at the end of this class. So chicken, marinated with the yogurt, all of it going in. And that's on the basis that these onions are starting to go from soft to golden brown, and that's enough time for it to cook along with the chicken to finish up completely cooking. So I'm just gonna let that chicken sort of sear a little bit, not completely cook, before I put the paste in. So I've just got the paste sitting on the side, and I just wanna let it sit for a minute and kind of just break the pieces apart. I have made this dish with lamb, and it's spectacular. It's originally, I believe, a lamb dish, because the Mughals ate more lamb than chicken. But you know, chicken's just, everyone loves chicken, so it's always a safe one to do. If I prepare it with tofu, when you can add it in now. Yeah, because it's going to just sear the tofu and give it a little bit of texture if that's what you're doing. And if you've done tofu, cubing it up would be good just to give it that bite-sized sort of a chunk. So it's going to let that sit and that to the side. The Indian bay leaf's going to go in shortly, just not yet. I'm going to leave him here. Whoops, leave him here so I don't forget for it to go in. When is the cinnamon? Oh, thank you. I totally forgot about this. Yes, the cinnamon goes in with the cardamom and the caraway seeds. Thank you for keeping me honest. Who's that? It was, I think, Michael. Yes. Yes, it goes in. So if you have the vegetarian option, the bay leaf and the cinnamon go in. So you can mix and match if you have the specialty ingredients, but don't want to do meat. You're more than welcome to put those in. Yeah. So it's starting to sizzle. Going to give that another couple of minutes before the spice paste goes in. I'm going to put that to the side as well. Yep, so this is starting to sort of get seared-ish, and that's enough for me to pop the spice paste in. So that's just sitting over here. I'm just going to go directly into, and once this guy goes in, you're going to need to get your hand on and start stirring a lot, because the tendency for it to get burnt is going to go up. And so the more of a chance you have to stir, the better the chance it gets to mix in well together and not get burnt. And with that goes in the bay leaf. And we're just going to stir that up. So at this point with the vegetarian version, you would have already put the yogurt into the blender. You would have a little bit of cream that could go in at this point as well. By cream, I mean the coconut cream. So you don't have to put all of it in. So I think I measured out 3/4 of a cup. About half a cup can go in now, just because this is the point where the meat's going to cook, and we want as much of that creamy, delicious goodness to be in with the meat, because that's the point of korma. It's to braise the meat in the beautiful fats that come with the coconut. We'll reserve a little bit of that coconut cream for the end to add on top. And we will bring this to a heat before we add the either almond or coconut milk that we have about a cup's worth that goes in to completely cook the vegetables that are already in there. So hopefully everyone's sort of tracking okay, and there aren't too many questions, but yeah, pop them in if you do have any, or shout out. Either way is fine. But yeah, we're going to just let this cook for a little bit before we add the saffron, because I do want that to cook almost 3/4 of the way and then bring it up to a complete boil with the saffron water. But yeah. Now I added about a teaspoon's worth of salt for the marinade. So I'm just going to go in right now with about a half a teaspoon's worth of salt, and no more than that, I don't think, because that might get too salty, and I'll taste it at the end to make sure that there is enough salt, and I'll test for sugar as well at the end. But I will do salt now, because salt, you need to put salt into food when it's raw and it's first starting to cook, because that's when the flavors start to meld together. And otherwise, when you add salt at the end, it's just going to be salt flavor as opposed to what salt's supposed to do, which is enhance the flavors of the food it's being added to. All right. This is coming along. Just a couple of more minutes, I think, with this before I add the saffron water and start to bring that together. And that's when it starts to go from paste to korma or gravy, if you like, before we start to move on to the final part of the dish. Did you put the spices, cinnamon in yet? Yes. So I missed that. Michael called me out on it. So the cinnamon should have gone in at the beginning, but you can totally put it in now, because we're about to add some saffron water, and it's just going to kind of boil with everything, and the flavors will still come out of it. So you're totally fine. All right. So, So the smell I'm looking for is the cooked smell. So you probably typically know what raw onion or raw ginger or well, onions should be cooked by now, but raw onion and ginger smell like. And because we blended that in the paste, I want that to cook before I add any water, because that really starts to remove some of the bitterness that it would have. And because we're going on a low heat, typically it takes a lot longer to cook, just by virtue of that. So we want to make sure that's almost there. It needs 2 more minutes. How long is saffron good for? That's a really good question. I would say for a very long time, because I wouldn't want to throw it away. It's not cheap. A lot of work goes into actually sort of harvesting it as well. But I actually don't have a definite answer for you there for saffron. I'm not sure. I would say hopefully not, probably not never, but probably quite a while. I would say it has quite a long shelf life. The only thing there is the older it is, the less fragrant it'll be, but the color should still hold. So yes, it does smell delicious over here, Elaine. Let's see, wondering how long, so yep. Cheaper imitation of saffron, I assume that wouldn't have the same effect flavor. I don't know, potentially not, but it would still give you the effect at least, better than turmeric. I would say if you do have some form of saffron, that's gonna serve better in this dish than turmeric. Turmeric is the sort of go-to if you absolutely can't get your hands on any kind of saffron. Sorry, I missed what cut of chicken to use. So I would use either breast or thigh. I'm using breast because I'm trying to be healthy, but some people, because we're cooking it on a low heat and not for very long, it's not going to make the breast tough. Unlike like if you threw chicken breast into a slow cooker and you cooked it for 8 hours, it becomes really rubbery. That's not going to happen here. So if you prefer breast, that's fine. Otherwise, chicken thighs is sort of a very forgiving cut of meat. It'll always sort of help in terms of cooking and always be tender and moist. If you are using turmeric, how much would you recommend? I'd start with 1/4 teaspoon. As you'll notice, because we're using saffron here, this isn't going to be a very yellowy korma. It'll still have sort of a whitey creaminess to it. So even for the turmeric, you really won't need that much. And again, very bitter if you put too much in. So 1/4 teaspoon to start, and then taste the dish before, and not now, later on, before you can always add more at the end. So that's always an option. All right, I'm going to go in with the saffron. As you can see, it just goes to a very beautiful golden yellow. And just the smell. Saffron just, you know, I think it's one of those, some people like it, some people hate it, but I am quite fond of it. And it just kind of really is quite lovely. And so again, low heat, so it's going to take a while for this to heat up, but we're just going to let that sit and just kind of continuously stir that. It's gone so quiet here. Yeah, and that takes care of that part of the cooking. And then we're just going to let that braise for about anywhere between 12 to 15 minutes until the chicken's cooked through before we move on to garnishing. Which I'm going to do with this stuff. So while that stirs, can you guys see how pretty that's just sort of come together? It was like a glunky white paste, and now all of a sudden it's just this golden, pretty, lovely, creamy gravy. That's a lot of adjectives. But yes, it is starting to warm up, which is great. We want to get that there, and then I'm going to keep stirring it. What I have here, as you can probably see from the camera above, is some peas that'll go in at the end. I've got some almond flakes to garnish on top. I've got some sugar on standby in case I need it. And I've also got that cream, I think Michael might have asked about, that goes sort of as a dollop at the end. Now that is the alternative to use if you don't have hoya. Hoya or mawa is basically, well, hopefully you can see that, is basically, it looks like cheese, right? So does that not look like a block of cheese? Basically, it's milk that's been cooked down into a concentrated version of cheese, but it's not fermented. It's just milk. It doesn't have sugar added, so it's not condensed milk in that way, because condensed milk gets its viscosity from sugar, whereas this guy just gets its viscosity by lack of the presence of water. So it's something that's cooked down all the way. It's extremely rich and creamy. Now, again, Indian grocery store to get it. And so if that's not something that you'd be able to get a hold of, you know, double cream or heavy cream will do fine. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'm just going to drop the fire on this a little bit more because it's jumping up too high. We kind of want that to just sort of simmer underneath, simmering, just be at the simmer point, not bubbling up. Yeah, so not thickened cream though. Thickened cream is basically cream that has a thickening agent added to it. We don't want that. We want full fat stuff for this dish because it's a korma. But yes, we're just going to let that sit for a couple minutes, and then we're going to add, great question, Kathy, we're going to add so I'm going to say it the Indian way because I don't know how to say it the English way, but it's kevda essence. So we will add that absolutely at the very end. And the reason we do that, Kathy, is because we don't want the essence to evaporate when we're cooking it. We want to just add it at the end as a flavor. So we'll come back to that. It's not like paneer, John. Paneer is more like cottage cheese. So that's coagulated milk fats with like a type of acid. Like mom used to make cottage cheese at home. She used to coagulate warm milk with lemon juice. This is actually milk that's on a, I used to joke with mom, it's like, we'll sit down and watch these ladies who had hours, like it would take 6 to 8 hours to take a liter of milk and turn it into a chunk of koya. So it's one of those things that's cooked down. Other than heat, nothing else is used. It's just the water gets evaporated out of it and becomes really concentrated. So that's what mawa koya is. So hopefully that answers that, John. Let's see, for the vegetarian option, I have all the coconut cream in. When do we add the coconut milk? Now, you would add the coconut milk now. So that's all the gravy that's going in. If you've added the coconut cream as well, that's totally fine. Basically just bring it all together and just mix it into like a stew. And you will see some of that coconut milk get evaporated, so that'll thicken. But what we want to do with the vegetarian version is to make sure that there's enough liquid in there to completely cook the potatoes and carrots. So yeah, and then we'll add the cauliflower at the end. But yeah, any other questions? I'm loving this. I love when you guys ask questions because it really tests my knowledge. Oh, it smells so good. All right, no questions. That's cool. That's cool. Hopefully everyone's learning something and having a good time while we're at it. So actually that's, you forget who asked the question, but does everyone know what kevda is or has heard of it maybe, if at all? And if not, so I'm just gonna pop him over here. Yeah, that's visible now. So kevda water. So this is the water. There's also, it also gets sold in essence form. If you've ever heard of pandan, it's basically a variant of it. So pandan leaves, which is used a lot, it's actually right here. This is pandan leaves, which I have ready to use for my laksa class. So that's pandan leaf. So this is from a very different plant. It's just leaves, whereas kevda is actually from the male species of plant pandan, and it actually takes out the essence from the flower. So it's a floral, fragrant sort of an essence, unlike pandan, which is more sort of robust. And it's, again, really to add and complete that flavor at the end of the dish, used very widely during the Mughal period. They really were all about decadent food. And that's why I've given rose water or rose essence as a substitute, because it just adds that floral bits at the end. If they're almost completely cooked, Michael, then I would add them. Shall I add them now, or do we need to reduce a bit more? If you've got the coconut milk in there already and it's still quite runny, I would reduce it slightly and then add them in, because otherwise they'll turn into mush. But yeah, hopefully that answers that question. But don't put the cauliflower in yet, because that's just going to turn into mush. I'd add that at the very end, because it's already completely cooked. How much of the kevda water? So if you've got water, it's about 2 teaspoons. If you've got the essence, which is the more concentrated version, just a teaspoon's more than enough. And if you don't have either of those, you can actually use pandan essence, but you would need like a drop of it because it's really strong. Alternatively, rose water or rose essence to the same measurements as the kevda water that I just mentioned. A teaspoon for the water version, and 2 teaspoons for the water version, and a teaspoon for the essence. But yeah. Hopefully that's all going good. If you were eating it tomorrow, would you add the kebab tomorrow too? It's a good question. If you are eating it tomorrow and you're going to heat it up tomorrow, after you've heated it up at the very end, add the kebab. I would recommend that, yes. You can maybe add a teaspoon, if you've got like the water version like this, the diluted version, you can add a teaspoon today and a teaspoon tomorrow, just so that you don't lose that flavor. But give it a taste today just to make sure everything is in order before you set it aside to eat tomorrow. Now, I didn't put this in the recipe, but you can add dried fruits. So Navratan Korma is actually a vegetarian version of this dish, which is a variant of Mughal food, because again, in the Mughal period, the coming together of the empires had the Muslims and the Hindus have to coexist. And so they did create a vegetarian version of this. Navratan means 9 gems, again, gems because we were dealing with royals. And so the 9 gems that go into a Navratan Korma is basically the nuts, the dried fruit, and the vegetables. And they would use all types of dried fruit. They'd use raisins, they'd use apricots, dried pineapple even, dried figs. So they really enjoyed this dish in that way, just not from a creamy sense, but also from a sweet sense, which is why I bring that up, because if you are adding dried fruits to it, be mindful that that sweetness in the dried fruit will continue to release into the dish long after you finish cooking it. So it's going to get sweeter as the days go by. So just be mindful of that when you taste at the end. If you want to add sugar, don't add too much if you've got dried fruit in there, because that sweetness is going to come out of the dish. All right, so that's done from my perspective. I'm going to go ahead and grate the koya in. If you have double cream or heavy cream, you can go ahead and pour that in and leave a little aside for garnishing if you prefer. So you can always add a dollop at the end, but this is just going in like cheese. And it's going to melt in to add that extra rich creaminess. Once I'm done with this, I'll add the peas and give it a taste before I add the kebra water. If sugar is added, when do you add it initially? You wouldn't add it initially, you just add it at the end. You'll just be tasting to see if it's sweet enough before you add it, because the thing with this dish is that because it's really creamy, sometimes sweetness and creaminess together can be a bit much. So it really depends on your tasting. So you taste it first at the end, once it's completely cooked, and then decide if you wanted to add any sugar. Again, being mindful of if you had dried fruit in there, that's going to sweeten it as well over the next couple of days if you keep it in the fridge. Cool. All right, that has gone in completely. Whoop. I'm just going to stir that now. And then this dish is done from my side. How's everyone going with theirs? Almost toward the end?
Does anyone who's been cooking along want to share their progress? We'd be really excited to see how everything's going for you guys. It looks so delicious. I am so excited with everyone cooking right.
I'm just going to toss those in, and then once I stir this, these are frozen peas, so they're not fresh peas. If you had fresh peas, they'd go in earlier because they need to cook, but these are already cooked. So I'm just going to scatter them on top and then give it a stir with the kevra essence before it's ready to serve. All right. I'm going to go in with 2 teaspoons of this guy. And then I'm going to give it a taste to check for sugar and salt. And other than that, we should be good. Oh, wow, that does smell really, really floral. All right, I am just going to give it a taste over here. Can we add tomatoes in the dish? I don't see why not, Rima. I've seen recipes that have added it. However, the traditional way of making it doesn't have tomatoes in it. It's funny because tomatoes, I think, aren't originally from India, and typically they are added to certain curries. But I think that only happened when tomatoes were brought to India. Most Indian dishes, not all, but most typically only ever have ginger, garlic, onion, and other forms of creating gravy, like nuts in this case. But sorry, that was really good. But that's not to say you can't add tomatoes. It will make the dish red. Korma is meant to be yellow. That's probably the only thing that you need to be sort of concerned about. And the way you could counter that is to add more turmeric. But again, you're starting to now play with flavors, and it can get a little tricky when you do that, because korma is quite delicate, and if you're not careful, you can sort of create a different flavor that might be unpleasant. So for example, when I first started playing around with the vegan version, I found that adding all those spices that I mentioned before made it far too bitter. So again, if you're doing a vegetarian version, you want to add tomatoes, that's fine. It adds a bit of acidity, but you need to be mindful that it may not be yellow. And you can, and that's not to say that it's not a korma, as long as you've got the other things in there, like nuts and saffron. So hopefully that answers that question. Can you add cauliflower to the chicken dish? Sure, why not? I just added peas to the chicken dish. I mean, look, you can play with this, right? It's funny, as having this chat with a friend, and cauliflower actually didn't come to India until the British period, which is after the Mughal period. So if you're being a purist, or at least if you want a fun fact, cauliflower is not something that you would traditionally add to korma. But that's not to say you can't do it now. If you've got it in the pantry, especially, rather than throwing it out, throw it into the dish. Add pretty much any vegetable, eggplant, ladyfingers, anything really can go in. But the staples like potatoes and carrots and those sorts of things are always a good, safe choice. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. But yeah, I'm good. I think this guy tastes pretty great. I'm just gonna try it one more time because I was a little bit distracted when I was Oh yeah, that's really good. How are you guys going? Are you all done with yours? I can see, is that, oh, Peter's, I thought he was eating something, he's wiping his hands. I'm just gonna serve this out into a dish. And have it ready to go for a very late breakfast over here. Yeah, okra, exactly. That's I said, I think I said ladyfingers, but yes, okra. It's the same with eggplant as well. It has so many different names. Aubergine, brinjal, I think is the British name, and then an eggplant, I think, is the American name for it.
Gosh, what are the naans you're supposed to show us?
Yes. I made naan last night, so because I decided that I was gonna make korma today, that I would have it with some naan, and so that's them over there.
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
To go. Oh, you can't see
Very
that
nice.
here. I'm just gonna. It's garlic naan, so it's got garlic smushed in there, and it smells amazing, and it's got nigella seeds on top. If you know, it kind of gives that oniony flavor and a little bit of coriander leaves. So yeah, that would be the thing that I recommend having this with. Or traditionally, you would have it with naan. But yeah, so I've got a basket full. So I've got my day set.
I've never heard of nigella seeds.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, nigella seeds are basically they're often called onion seeds, and they're not from the onion family. They're from the buttercup family, but they have an onion flavor, and so they're lovely when you throw them on top of any kind of bread. Like, doesn't have to be naan. It can even be like if you're making a loaf of bread at home. It just kind of adds that little sort of sweet bite to it. It's actually used on top of bread. So ajwain is one that's added to the tops of like farm loaves. Nigella is another one. I can't think of any more at the moment, but lots of those sorts of spices end up being used. Even caraway seeds, for the matter, get added to pretzels, actually, in Germany. So yeah, so they're a great way to add just a little bit of flavor on top of a loaf of bread. There we go. So I'm just going to go. So you can already see that this korma has thickened as a consequence of just sitting. Its inside is delicate and still milky, but the outside starting to crust over. That's fine. So I'm just going to go in with some almond flakes on top, and I like coriander, so I'm just going to grab my coriander. Doesn't have to be coriander. I know some folks don't like it. You can most certainly use any other number of Garnish, I think I suggested quite a few different ones. Actually, you can do crushed black pepper, you can do crushed coriander instead of fresh coriander. You can even do fenugreek leaves, dried fenugreek leaves. It serves quite nicely because it's really bitter. It actually cuts through the creaminess. So depending on what you like, you can always sort of garnish it and then have it ready to go. Maybe have it with a little bit of naan, and voila. And that was it.
I'm taking lots of screenshots.
Oh, okay.
To take one officially without blurriness so we can feature it.
Yes, I can do that after we're done with class, which means I can't eat that for now, which sucks, but that's fine. I'm just gonna stop screen share now.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.